Welcome, everybody. I'm super excited to be here with Dan Saunders. We connected. Dan, how did we connect? Over LinkedIn? Was it just like that? One of those?
I think LinkedIn through mutual connections, and we just started making points about fundraising. And I thought a lot of the things that you were talking about were really insightful and things that I were not necessarily hearing from other people in the industry, which I always think is cool. And I always enjoy connecting with fundraisers who are engaging in thought leadership and doing cool things. So I think, yeah, we just met organically through mutual connections and seeing each other's commentary on LinkedIn, which is how I think I've met a big percentage of my fundraising network is on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has been a wonderful place for a lot of industries, but I think in particular for the fundraising space as a way of trading ideas and hopefully generating new ones.
So what I found is that LinkedIn is a great place. Dan, sorry to interrupt you, but I found that that LinkedIn is a great place to just have kind of real substantial conversations that I wasn't able to find elsewhere. Dan was one of the contributors to those. I do invite everybody who's on here to just post their thoughts and add to, even if it's just a comment or reflecting on your own experience. I think there's lots of people now posting, and I invite everybody to do that and to connect with Dan too.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to reach out and connect with me. I love hearing what fundraisers in different sectors are doing throughout the industry, issues, questions you're having. I mean, I think that type of discourse is important. And honestly, it's that off the cuff stuff, which over the years has generated the best ideas for me personally. But I know a lot of people that I talk to, like, I mean, that's why I think LinkedIn has been so important for the fundraising sector during the pandemic, because like most of those off the cuff conversations that I would happen at the Bridge conference, at a happy hour or something. And that was all lost during the pandemic, but LinkedIn has replaced a lot of it. And I would just add to everyone watching to definitely put your thoughts out there on a regular basis and engage in thought leadership. I mean, I'm not really a big fan of that term thought leader. I think the marketplace decides who the thought leaders are. But if you do put out your thoughts and they are unique and they're substantial, I promise there are other fellow fundraisers out there who will want to connect with you and acknowledge you. And it just is a great place for that. And the LinkedIn posts, I mean, they give you, I think it's 1,200 characters, maybe 1,000 characters, but you have a lot of space to make pretty substantial points. And that's how I got started. It was completely organic, but I can't recommend it enough. And, as I've kind of gone on my journey here and talking to you, Louis, I really want to try to get other fundraisers to join the conversation, because there's so many smart ones that are doing cutting edge things. And I know it's intimidating to put your opinions out there, but for the most part, if you're doing good stuff, all of the feedback is positive, and it's amazing how quickly you connect and catch on with people. So I can't encourage it enough.
Thank you, Dan. And speaking of connecting and of sharing your thoughts, feel free to share in the chat where you're listening in from, what questions you have. Dan Saunders here today is an expert in lots of things, but he works most closely, I believe, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, within the direct response and mail arena, although his whole area of expertise is how that is just not enough. We need to think outside of the silos, crossing departments and crossing functional areas. But we're definitely interested in everything you have to share today, both Dan and everybody that's listening. So please do feel free to chat in. Dan, do you want to tell us about your background, how you got to be a VP at Conrad Direct, what path led you there? And of your other volunteering. I know you volunteer in the industry pretty significantly. Would you like to share all of that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you asking. And thanks for having me today. I really appreciate and respect this amazing community that you've built. And I've been really impressed at what I've seen from the participants and the ideas. So thanks for having me today. It's a real honor to be here. And I mean that. So I've been in the fundraising space now for almost 15 years. All of that has been at Conrad Direct. Conrad Direct is one of the largest independent list brokerage and direct response strategy firms in the country. And that means that we don't own any of the data that we help link our clients with for finding new donors. We literally, my job is to go across the marketplace, regardless of who owns the list, who owns the data, to find nonprofit organizations the best lists and data possible to find new donors. So that's most of what my day job consists of. As you mentioned, like many fundraisers, I wear a lot of different hats, and a big part of my job is having bigger picture, strategic conversations with clients that I work with. And actually, it's funny because one of the first things that I learned about my job as a list broker is that there's really no part of the process where you can kind of step back and say, that's not my job. You need to be involved in everything, whether it's the merge purge, strategy decisions. We have access to a ton of information as list brokers, just from reading the mail, seeing what types of techniques mailers are using, signers, ask strings. There's so much information that's in the mail, and we feel like we're in a unique position to contribute that. And a lot of our clients and the agencies that we work with very much welcome that feedback. So that perspective has really kind of informed my opinions about the industry, where I think it needs to go, and my involvement in it. So again, that's most of what I do during the day, in addition to wearing a lot of other hats. But in the last few years, I have decided to take the journey into, like I said, I don't really like calling it thought leadership. It's more just putting my thoughts out there, seeing if there's a community that's responsive to them within the fundraising space, if other people feel similarly, and making connections and growing networks. And my general and that's included content on LinkedIn, videos, the podcasts. I host a Dynamic Nonprofits podcast, which is available on. Thank you very much. That's very kind. When I started, I had no idea if anybody was going to listen to it, and we've had over 3,000 downloads to date, which is just amazing. Yeah, which is just amazing. I can't believe just the how it caught on, and when I go to shows and stuff, and that's a lot of times that's what people recognize me from, and it's amazing. But the podcast is dedicated to advocating for what I call an unsiloed approach to fundraising. And that's really kind of where my passion has gone in the last few years, is using my platform, but also my industry involvement through the Direct Marketing Association of Washington to advocate for this unsiloed approach, which is a buzz term that's been around for a while, but I really try to break it down and focus on execution. And really what unsiloed fundraising means in a nutshell is not just engaging on multiple channels with your organization, but coordinating those efforts. So putting your direct mail and your social media and your email teams in the same room, talking about what they're doing, looking for ways that they can coordinate in an unsiloed manner. Sometimes that means messaging to the same people on different platforms. Other times it simply means borrowing ideas from what's working on another platform and recycling that in your direct mail. I mean, the classic example that I use is that in a lot of cases, social media is farmed out to a communication department within nonprofit organizations, because social media isn't always viewed as a revenue generating tool. But if you have a social media presence, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever it is that's your dominant platform, you have donors and supporters who are providing unsolicited feedback. And that is some of the most valuable feedback you will ever get. And anyone that works in direct mail that's ever read comment mail knows this. This was a piece of advice that I got years ago from a client who, even though he's been in the industry for decades, he reads every piece of comment mail that comes back, good, bad, or otherwise, because people are volunteering their feedback. They're telling you what motivated them to give, why they gave, why they maybe didn't give, what excites them, what they don't like about the organization. And social media comments I view very much in the same vein. The problem is that in a siloed structure within an organization, that information never gets to the development team. Whereas if you're in a meeting, and that's part of unsiloed fundraising as well, it's not just unsiloing your channels, it's unsiloing the different parts of your organization and making sure that that feedback from the communications team is making its way to the direct response teams. Same thing with the programmatic parts of an organization. A lot of times there's either physical walls or physical floors between direct response and the programmatic team, and they never meet, they never talk. But if you're in a meeting and you hear what's coming up on the programmatic end, you can know what to write about in your direct mail letter or in your upcoming email. Or it goes the other way as well, where the fundraising team can say, hey, this really excites donors. This is what's doing really well in the mail right now. Can we focus more on this programmatic area so that you can engage in activities which we know the donors value, but that you're also generating work product for the direct mail. And that's really the nexus of unsiloed fundraising. It's unsiloing between the channels, but also between different areas of the organization to give everyone access to the same information to improve and streamline their efforts. And it also extends to vendors within the industry as well. A lot of vendors are very specialized in direct mail or digital, and they may never talk to vendors or people within the organization who work in a different department. And it's amazing how ideas kind of just organically generate once fundraisers start talking to other fundraisers, regardless of what medium they work on. So that's really been the focus of Dynamic Nonprofits. A lot of the work that I've done with DMAW is just trying to better connect the industry and unsilo our fundraising efforts, because I believe that's the key to building stronger relationships with donors and more financially viable nonprofit organizations.
I love this, Dan. You make two really good points that we talk a lot about in our donor participation project sessions. And now is, my little moment for a pitch. This is a great organization that we started about 12 months ago, 14 months ago. And I'll put the link in the comments in a moment. But the 2 points that you make that we hear a lot about is that the devil is in the details, truly. So it's reading those responses and, not only thinking, oh, yes, you have to unsilo, or, oh, yes, you have to be responsive. It's, well, how? Exactly. Where does the mail arrive? Who gets it? What you were saying about different departments. So I'd love to hear today about people's experiences with that. Maybe smaller shops have it a little bit easier in this sense. But maybe, like a really quick poll, who reads the return mail from when they do a direct response letter?
I would love to see that in the comments. If you could just let us know, does your organization read comment mail? I'm curious if other mailers are doing that. And if not, feel free to take that idea, because I think it'll change the way you think about
Number one takeaway.
The thing is, Louis, is that we spend so much time, and rightfully so, talking about getting donor feedback and talking to donors, understanding donor motivations. And there's all kinds of ways to do that. It's almost limitless now. There's a lot of technological solutions, especially with online giving, to solicit feedback after a donor makes a contribution. But I believe we're sitting on a lot of information that we're also not properly utilizing, where donors are literally telling us unsolicited, which I think makes it even more valuable, what they're excited about or what maybe they would like to see improve with the organization.
Exactly. And the second thing that we talk a lot in donor participation project sessions is that nobody truly has all the answers. Causes, like you say, like who's thinking about the whole shop, right? So maybe you have a vendor or a team that's doing digital, and they're not talking to the mail, and they're not volunteer engagement. But also the fact that donor participation has declined over the last decades. For me, it's a little bit of a moment of inspiration. Look, there's a junior team member out there. There's an organization that's starting out that's going to have better solutions than we do. And I think being active on LinkedIn, like you are, being an active member of the industry, is going to help us discover those things. So speaking of Dan, You mentioned DMAW. I understand you recently had a conference with them. How did that go?
It went really well. It was our second year virtual. So the DMAW is the Direct Marketing Association of Washington. We're the largest regional trade association dedicated to fundraising in the country. I believe we have about 1,000 members. And Data Strategy Forum is basically in the spirit of unsiloed fundraising, even though that's not how it started out. It's an all of the above showcase where we bring together speakers from across the industry, as well as attendees from across the industry, to hear about what's important, what's working in direct response fundraising. And again, very much so, the idea is to get everybody in the same room to hear about things that they otherwise wouldn't be exposed to. Because I love going to big shows where you tracks and you can pick like what best fits your needs. But the thing is that when you do that, most people will self-silo. You'll go to the things that you specialize in because you have to justify the cost of attendance. It's totally rational, but that's why we have one stage where everybody sees the same speakers, and we try to make the show as relevant as possible, whether you work in direct mail or digital or production. So there'll be something there for you, but more importantly, you'll get a global perspective about what's happening in the industry. So we had about 100 virtual attendees. And next year, we're thrilled and looking forward to going back into person. I believe the show would be in October 2022 at the National Housing Center in Washington, D.C. We're very much looking forward to that. Again, there's a lot of smart fundraisers on this call. I'm seeing reading in the comments. If you're doing something, engaging in thought leadership, I mean, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Let me know, because we're always looking for speakers, or if you're looking to connect with more fellow fundraisers, DMAW has been a great outlet for me, so I definitely recommend it. But the show was very good. I mean, virtual shows, as I'm sure you know, are challenging right now. We're all a little zoomed out, so you really have to make it valuable and engaging. But the interesting thing this year was that we've talked about unsiloing fundraising in the past, but it was amazing how organic the conversation was this year, that it was actually the speakers and the presenters that were talking about the importance of it. So our opening session was a joint presentation by Next After and Virtuous. And I'll give a hat tip to a study that they put together, which is called The State of Multichannel Fundraising, or maybe The State of Multichannel Communication. And I could drop a link into the chat as we get closer to wrapping up here. But what that study showed that was so transformational is that we've known for a while that multi-channel donors, people who give through 2 channels, are extremely valuable. In some cases, 300% more valuable than a single channel donor. But what their study found is that just sending emails to a direct mail donor or sending physical mail to an online donor increases the value of those single channel donors and their retention rates. And so we're finally putting data to this, that if you have a dominant fundraising channel, and for a lot of organizations, it's not a universal rule, but for a lot of organizations, it's still direct mail. Direct mail in a lot of cases still accounts for 90% of revenue generated by organizations. But if you build pillars onto that dominant channel, whether it's email, social media communication, multiple social media networks, text, SMS, I mean, the opportunities out there are limitless today. Those additional touch points of engagement, before I forget, display is something that I keep hearing a lot about. And display was written off years ago as being something that was not good for fundraising.
What does display mean for those who are not familiar with the term?
So Google ads, banner ads, as they're sometimes derisively called. But unless you have an emergency fundraising appeal, like a natural disaster or international relief, they still aren't great for direct fundraising. But what I increasingly hear more of is that they're important for influencing donations downstream. So if you're showing display ads, whether it's traditional banner ads or ads on social media that don't have a call to action but are just branded, or or about your organization and don't have necessarily a call to donate, or at least that's not the goal, that those can increase the donations if you're sending those display ads to people who are going to be getting direct mail. So what we're finding is that all of these additional touch points incrementally add to the value of donors, regardless of what their preferred channel of giving is. So the evolution of that conversation is, okay, well, we have to rethink what a multi-channel donor is. The classic example is, and actually, if you want to ask this to the group, I'm really curious to get their feedback on this, because I think it's a really good kind of brain teaser, is if you have a direct mail donor who gets a mail piece and then goes online and makes a donation, is that a direct mail donor? Is that an online donor? Is it a multi-channel donor? How do you classify them? And I'll tell you, my opinion is that it's a multiple touch point donor. It's somebody that converted online, but that direct mail touch point was critical for driving the conversion. So the evolution from that is not just having these touch points, but unsiloing the communication between the different vendors and departments that are responsible for them. Because it's very easy to say, oh, we should be sending emails to our direct mail donors, but it's much more difficult if you don't have all the stakeholders talking to each other on a regular basis.
That's fascinating. And it's kind of part of what I see as the convergence of marketing and fundraising, because you're talking so much about relationship building through what used to be one-way method, means of communication. You send that direct mail letter, it goes out to the void, hopefully you get money back. But, you're talking about reading the responses. You're talking about deepening relationships, not only with a letter, but adding a call and the display Google ads and Facebook ads. There's a DPP member who has actually put their social media presence under development at an orchestra out in California. And I thought that was a really interesting experiment. We have a question from Ron further up. And Cameron just responded. Thanks so much for being here, Cameron. But Ron Eisenstein, let me see if I can find you. He says, have you made any global changes to your efforts based on return mail feedback separate from feedback specific to the individual only? If so, what was it? I have to say, I listen to that all the time. We've made that. I'll let you respond then.
Yeah, actually, no, I'm curious to hear your feedback. I do have a response, but if you have something to add to that, no, I'd be curious to hear yours.
By golly, if there isn't a mistake we haven't made, it's a minor miracle. So we've had responses about this doesn't make sense, and you know what? Most of the time, it doesn't make sense. And we fix it. We've had responses about things that show confusion. So, for instance, they answer something else. We've had some campaigns are designed to garner a response, like send a note to this nurse that's retiring at our organization, things like that, right? I'm sure Dan has tons of examples.
Yeah, well, the classic example is, and this goes back at least 10 years, is there's a multi-issue political organization that we work with where people were writing in saying, I don't want to become a member, but I support you on this specific issue. And that was really eye-opening. And it's something that we have seen played out over the years, that there are types of donors who, regardless of how much affinity they have for a cause, will never respond to a call for membership. Now, the donors who want to become a member are generally very valuable. But there is a marketplace of donors who want to give a one-time gift that are more transactional in nature. And if you're focusing on a single issue, to stay away from membership language or membership benefits, and instead of focus on the impact of the donation on that individual issue as a way to better connect with that donor. Because if you do have a single issue or a very focused appeal, but you're focusing too much on global membership, it actually can turn off donors who aren't inclined to that. There's no there's no hard answer on why that is. I suspect it's because the term membership implies more of a responsibility on the part of the donor. Maybe it's more of a it's more of a presumption than making a
ongoing
one-time
commitment.
gift. Yeah, and the thing is that in a vacuum, I would rather have membership-oriented donors, but there's also an entire marketplace of donors who prefer to make one-time gifts. The key then is to monitor those donors on the back end and have them segmented out on your data to see how they respond. So you may not need to mail those donors as often, or you may only want to mail them on the issue that they came in on. But that was supplied on a reply form that I don't wish to become a member, but I support you on this issue. Here's my $25, and that's something that we've seen repeatedly. There's been other feedback where donors were writing in. Again, this is to multifaceted political organizations that they don't support maybe the social issues that the organization works on, but they're concerned about fiscal issues. So from that, we started incorporating more language about fiscal impact into mail pieces. So those are just two examples. But for the most part, if you look at reply mail, donors will at least give you some clue about why they're giving, but also those subtle nuances, which can help you make changes into your mail piece. The key is to always A/B test. So don't, you can't take anecdotes as data, but if you A/B test some of these changes, that information will tell you if you're making a positive change. But it's equally critical to track donors downstream for their retention, their lifetime value, to make sure that changes that you're making are not increasing your front end response, which is something else we could talk about, metrics and things that you should be looking at for when you plan your direct mail. That is entirely possible that you could make changes that can boost your front end response or front end return on investment, but actually decrease your retention and lifetime value later on. So it's important to monitor both of those aspects. But I mean, those are the two classic examples which were completely generated from reading feedback mail.
Wow. So you took it really far. I mean, I'm not going to, next time you send me a letter, I'm not responding. I'll take you down another rabbit hole.
I have I have one other example that may be valuable for anyone that deals with board members who may not be familiar with the dynamics of direct mail. So we had a mailer that wanted to know why they were getting so much negative feedback. So this was actually a subscription offer. People who were saying that they don't want to subscribe, or maybe they were making negative comments about the publication. And it's very easy if you're not connected to the inner workings of direct mail to say, hey, why are we getting all this negative feedback? What are we doing wrong? And I said, well, I think we should match back those comments to the lists. And I've done this multiple times now where it's counterintuitive, but sometimes the lists that generate your best response, positive response, also generate your best negative response. Why? Because the people on there are reading their mail and they're responsive to the mail. So in some ways, if your overall plan is working, obviously, you have to be producing positive results in the bigger picture. But sometimes negative feedback can actually be a really positive indicator, because I know you talk about a lot, Louis, about the importance of attention and gaining the donor's attention and then making it a worthwhile experience. So if you have a really compelling mail piece or a really compelling piece of email creative, it could just be that you're gaining so much attention that you're also soliciting that negative feedback. But multiple times when I've gone through that exercise, we've seen that the best responding lists also generated the most negative feedback. And sometimes that's really good for contextualizing it, because if you have a board member, if you have an executive director that isn't connected to the inner workings of mail, it's really easy to work off of response bias and say, oh, we must be doing something wrong. Look at all these angry letters that we're getting. It could actually be a product of the positive attention that you're generating with your offer.
Can I give you what I think is a good example then?
Absolutely.
So honor rolls or donor lists, which in fact I saw very good use of them during the past presidential campaigns. But boy, you're going to hear back from people, and a lot of it is not going to be positive. But also that means people care, that they're looking at them with a hawk eye, and they're, in my experience, driving gifts. You always see gifts from that. So I think that's a really good example. But then, because people hear this negative feedback, right, then the kind of advice is, well, it's too much work, don't do them. I always feel that this is exactly what you're talking about, and I'm grateful you kind of put it into words so clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not, I think one of the hardest things to do in this industry is to have empathy for people who don't work day to day. And it's not that they don't know, it's why would they know? They don't do this every day. And sometimes I found it to be helpful as a direct mail fundraiser, whether I'm talking to somebody who works in a different channel. I mean, you have no idea how many times over the last 15 years I've heard, oh, is direct mail dying? Does it still work? Well, yes, it still works. And it actually works better than ever because so many organizations and marketers assume that it is dying, that it's antiquated, that if you have something compelling, it's actually more effective than it's ever been. But I have found it helpful to just have empathy and to think, okay, well, there's a reason why this person doesn't know this, and then try to figure out how to connect with them. And that can be helpful because, especially if you work at a larger organization, it's very easy for organizations to make reactionary decisions that are not based on direct response statistics. And as a fundraiser, it's critical for you to kind of be the firewall and figure out a way how to make your point, and in a way where to help the organization make better long-term decisions. And I want to think, I'm sorry, what was that?
Oh, managing up.
Exactly. Managing up. It's a critical element for sure, because at least in my experience, the higher up you go, the less connected someone's going to be day to day to the process of direct mail and the dynamic associated with it. I also want to thank everybody for the questions coming in. And again, I've been doing this 15 years. It's a genuine passion of mine, and I really enjoy answering questions and having dialogue. So if there's a specific need that you need help with and there's something we could answer on this call, I know sometimes, when I'm on one of these things, you're afraid to get too specific or to ask a question. Please do, or feel free to message me afterwards. I'd be happy to talk to you about them. Obviously, if there's something I can help you out with on the list front, I'd be glad to talk about it. But this is a true passion of mine, and if I can take a couple seconds to help point somebody in a good direction, I'm more than happy to do that.
And he will. I can vouch for that. Dan will actually respond. Don't be shocked when he does. I think this is a good moment to reintroduce you, Dan. Dan Saunders, VP of Conrad Direct, here today. He also serves the industry in a variety of roles. He hosts a podcast. Please, I think the easiest way maybe is just people to connect. The easiest way for people to connect with you is just to reach out to you on LinkedIn right now. But we met online. We've been talking about the donor participation project and a whole lot of other things. As you can see, a lot of what he's talking about and where he's seeing the industry go is kind of very similar to what this group of fundraisers that is the donor participation project is discovering. I don't know, we're rediscovering. Something I really liked, Dan, about your ideas, I would say maybe half a year ago, was when you're inviting nonprofit leaders to be more active on Facebook through live streams, not only Facebook, but to be more of a presence on there. I think, like, given the opportunities today, it's a fantastic way to build brand and trust and impact donor relationships just in a more indirect way. Have you still, do you still advocate for that? Is that part of a bigger thing now for you?
150%, more than that if it's possible. And then I'll circle that back with something that I've really admired from your content is that you focus a lot on the importance of building community and how to actually do it. And as I was talking before, for those who weren't on the stream, I was talking about how additional touch points or additional points where you can add valuable communication with your donors, even if they're direct mail donors, email donors, whatever it is, will add value to that relationship. It deepens it. It will increase lifetime giving and retention. I dropped a link to the State of Multichannel Marketing study, which demonstrates a lot of that. I encourage everyone to look at the raw data and see that. But when you start realizing that, I think that's when it really kind of drives home the importance of doing something like a Facebook Live every week or every month, whatever's practical, with your executive director, but also people who work at the organization, who are on the ground doing the programmatic work, and giving your social media followers access to them. Because that, I think, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Louis, because I think you've kind of been one of the predominant thought leaders in how to actually build community. I think creating a two-way dialogue is one of the first critical steps there, from taking your relationship from a transactional one that's based on the donor sending in money and the organization facilitating a mission to a true communal relationship. The easiest litmus test I have for this, and I challenge everyone watching to do it, is to look at your social media page and answer this question: what percentage of your social media comments does your organization respond to? And then think about that from the donor's end. Is that you're taking time to solicit feedback, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise? And if nobody's responding, is that really a community? And when I'm asked, well, how many comments should we respond to? My initial answer is all of them. And if you're large enough where that's impractical, then at least every thread, because sometimes the perception of responsiveness is as important as actually physically responding to every comment. But if you're a small organization with 100 donors, 500 donors, 1,000 donors, and you have a couple thousand social media followers, it might be entirely practical to literally respond to every comment. And that will very quickly change the nature of the conversations that you're having, the dynamic with your donors, and how they perceive your organization. The same thing is true when you do Facebook Lives. If I know that a lot of your members work in educational fundraising. So if you have the president of the university or people who work within the university that you can give access to and have them actually taking questions, it creates a sense of responsiveness. This is a two-way relationship. This is a community. You value my questions. You value my feedback. You just don't want to get my donation and then take the ball and run. And this type of thing has transformational impact with nonprofits. And the reason why I like the Facebook Live idea so much is that the technological barriers, as you're demonstrating here, Louis, are almost non-existent today. In a lot of cases, the technology is free, or you could literally do it with an iPhone. And I find that the quality of the conversations, the value you're providing for donors, will always win out over slick production values. So that's one of the easiest things that you could start doing tomorrow to engage with your donors and supporters on social media, is by providing them access to figures within your organization and actually taking questions from them on a regular basis. That and reading and responding to their social media comments.
Thank you, Dan, and everybody who's listening in today. Please feel free to introduce yourself, and don't make me look bad. Maybe go real quick to your social media page and see how many are actually receiving a response. But so we're thinking about all these new ways that we have to build trust, right? Which is, I think, essentially what it is. And we think that trust ends up in gifts. Sometime down the line, it's not one-to-one, but it adds up to that. How can mail support that? I'm thinking there's like we're as an industry, we're going to reconsider the role of mail in supporting all this trust building, and potentially, there's a lot of space to just have mail that's not asking. Have you seen good examples of that?
Well, the role that I think mail can play in that, if your organization has never utilized mail, is that we have to go back to the fundamentals about why direct mail works. And we saw this play out most of all during the early days of the pandemic. That even if you're like me and you're 38-year-olds, either millennial or Gen X, depending on where you want to draw the line with the generation, and I don't go to the mailbox every day, but when I do, it's appointment viewing. I'm guaranteed to spend a few minutes there going through my mail, looking through to see if there's something that's capturing my attention. And if it does, I will open it. I'll take a few minutes to read it. And we just don't treat our email or social media feed in the same way, especially younger social media users. I mean, you probably know this from your own experience, is that we just kind of scroll through everything, and everything has a flash second to capture your attention. Even if you're not aware of it, mail is different. I've heard it referred to as the mail moment, because it's still appointment viewing, even in a modern digital world. And in some ways, the novelty of it, I think, makes that mail moment more potent. So not just for getting the attention, but also the stories you're able to tell within a mail piece. Because if you're able to get somebody to open your mail piece, in addition to your appeal for donations, you're able to tell stories about your beneficiaries. Maybe it's a pub note from somebody that your organization has helped. You're able to include inserts that demonstrate the statistical impact of your organization. You're just able to convey more information and I believe build more trust and a connection with the reader in the mail piece than you are able to through other means. Doesn't mean that mail is better than digital fundraising, because I think everything has its asks. And there are those people that are pre-committed, that know they want to give, and you should have turnkey digital options available for them. In fact, one of the things that I'm very bullish on is QR codes in direct mail, because we all know how to use QR codes now. Even older traditional direct mail donors, anyone that's been to a restaurant in the last 2 years knows what a QR code is immediately. It's a universal language. They know how to use it. So for somebody who looks at the mail piece and says, oh yeah, I know this university, I know this charity, I want to give, they can go right away. They can use the QR code. They can go online and give a turnkey experience. I think that's super important. But for people on the fence, that's where I think direct mail is valuable. You're able to tell more stories. You're able to talk about the story of your organization, your historical achievements. And that's really how you build trust. And whether it's in education or in political fundraising, I think the same is true. There's a lot of people who talk about a lot of different issues, but if you're able to demonstrate a track record and showcase people who your organization have helped, who are willing to endorse your organization, that's how you build trust with somebody that may be on the fence or not pre-committed. The people who are pre-committed, those are the easy donors to capture, and we should look for turnkey ways to get them in the door and make it as easy as possible for them to give. But mail really helps bridging that gap with people who are on the fence, I feel.
How interesting. Thank you, Dan. So we are nearing the top of the hour. If anybody has questions for today's expert, Dan Saunders, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll do our best to answer them. We've talked about a whole lot of things, including multi-channel impact, including listening to your responses, which we should always be doing, right, as fundraisers. You mentioned metrics, Dan, and I feel like this is a topic that is close to your heart as an industry professional. What is, and I recently posted about that, kind of saying, metrics are good, but let's not go crazy. Some things you just can't measure, and you need to do them because they're right. I mean, like, you don't need proof that you need to brush your teeth. It's just use it, make it part of your routine. But what is your perspective on the use of metrics in direct response and elsewhere?
So direct, for anyone that's not familiar with direct mail, the most common direct mail metrics that are used on the front end, or looking at the immediate response that are generated, or the response rate or the return on investment. Some organizations look at the average gift or the net cost per donor. But in a lot of cases, mailers and agencies are still basing their goals on a budget amount that they're willing to lose on the mail. Because unless you're just a total rock star, you're probably not making money on prospecting through direct mail. And you make your money back on the back end. And if you are making money on the front end, you probably aren't mailing enough, to be honest. That's usually the rule of thumb. But equally, and I would argue more important, is looking at what I call the back end metrics, or lifetime value, retention rates, and seeing how your donors are holding up over time. And it doesn't always work out this way, but in a lot of cases, the more you pay to acquire a donor and the higher their average gift is, the more they're going to retain, the better they're going to retain down the line. Now, the tricky part about that is that, right, everybody wants to fundraise as efficiently as possible. And this is where things like overhead metrics come in. But in a lot of cases, your organization would be better off losing a little bit more money to acquire a better quality donor, a higher average gift. And you'll realize that value a year or two down the line when you look at how much revenue those donors are generating. By the same extension, you need to be careful about cost-cutting measures. I mean, the thing about direct mail is it's expensive. There's no way around that, which is why it doesn't make sense for some organizations that have very limited budgets that can't afford to invest like that. But if you're going to do things like try to go from an 8-page letter to a 4, or if you're fundraising to major donors, changing your paper stock, taking inserts out, a lot of these changes are going to look better on the front end because they're going to lower your costs, and they may or may not impact your response rates, although sometimes they will. But it'll look like you're fundraising more efficiently, but the quality of donor that you're acquiring starts to degrade. Somebody who reads an 8-page letter and makes a $50 donation to your organization is a very different donor than somebody who reads a 2 or a 4-page letter and makes a $25 gift. So more response, lower cost is not always better in the long run. Now, these tests are always important to do, which is why I'm a huge advocate for A/B testing. We should be treating direct mail the same way we do digital, with an optimization mindset and looking for ways to improve our direct mail, make it more personal, and see if investing in things like personalization or handwritten fonts, if they are worthwhile investments. We should be doing A/B testing. But also, when you do A/B tests, make sure to track those tests over time to see how they play out, to make sure that you're not making a decision that short-term is beneficial, but long-term may be costing the organization revenue. But the good news is that we're getting to a place where most CRM solutions have lifetime value capabilities. These things are not just for the big organizations anymore. They're very accessible, but they're important conversations to have with your CRM provider. Can you look at how much lifetime value is being generated from the donors that we're acquiring for the mail? Because that, honestly, is going to be your best clue as to how much you should be spending on mail, right? That's always the question that we get come budget season. How much should we be spending on our mail? Well, that can best be determined by how much your mail is generating over the long term. So this statistical information can actually empower you as a fundraiser by helping you make your case to your board, to your executive directors, and advocating for investing more in direct mail if you have that back end or lifetime value data to back it up.
That makes a lot of sense. Dan, thank you. We're super grateful for everybody that made time in their morning or their afternoon to join us today. Don't forget to follow Dan and comment on whatever he posts. It's always really interesting, and he actually responds. To those that might be interested, check out the Donor Participation Project. Just Google it and it will come up. It's a community of fundraisers. We get together every month or so, and we have really valuable discussions with peers. Would you like to make any closing remarks, Dan?
Well, I just want to say, yes, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to connect with you. Always happy to talk with fellow fundraisers. Look for the Dynamic Nonprofits podcast. We put out an episode or 2 every month, consisting of interviews, and also we do some solo shows where we do some deep dives into some tactical fundraising advice and some other fun stuff. But I also want to give a hat tip to what you all are doing at the Donor Participation Project, because I think it's phenomenal. That's what makes the fundraising industry really special, is that we have this grassroots energy of people that collaborate on their own, talk about ideas, and look for solutions together. And I think that Donor Participation Project has been one of the best examples of that I've seen. We certainly do a lot of that in DMAW alone, but I love just the energy of your group and the conversations that I've seen come out of it. So I just want to congratulate you all on putting together a very successful project here. And it's definitely something which I'm sure benefits the participants. But the only other thing that I would close with is, in the spirit of the donor participation project, is as a fundraiser, I would encourage everyone to always be thinking about testing and looking for things that you haven't seen case studies yet, maybe things that are counterintuitive in nature. You know, we talked about some counterintuitive examples during this conversation, because that's where your real success stories are going to come from, are the things that you either test into where you gain a first to market advantage or you're one of the first to discover it. I love case studies. I love white papers. I probably read as much of them as anybody. They're a valuable resource. But if you're always asking, where's the case study? Is there a white paper on this? You're always going to be behind the 8 ball and playing catch up. So I want to congratulate you in the donor participation project, because I think you've been a big part of changing the culture around testing and how we think about new ideas as fundraisers. So kudos to you all, and I definitely endorse that approach of what I call unconventional or counterintuitive testing strategy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dan. Hope to catch up with you soon.
Yes, thanks a lot, Louis. Appreciate your time, and thanks again for having me today. Appreciate it. Really enjoyed it.